Okay, you're up at number 4, Adam.
I am, and a very timely kind of pick on my end here because I know there was some discussion about this player in the online spaces this past weekend. I'm going to go with Brandon Miller out of Alabama, number 4 overall. It's a little bit of a change for me. I'd had him a little bit lower in the lottery coming into the last couple weeks. The consistency with which he shoots the basketball, playing in a well-spaced offense and something that tends to replicate a lot of what we see at the NBA level, has me incredibly intrigued. I think that he is really good off movement. He's an underrated guy at facilitating the pick and roll and knowing how to play with pace to force switches to get other people open, that there's a lot of unexplored space with his handle in a lot of different regards. I saw a little bit more of a desire from him to get downhill and attack last weekend against Kentucky that had me really enthused that he's going to continue to work on the aspects of his game that aren't great right now, which is efficiency in terms of getting to the basket and converting when he's there, at really being a high-level playmaker for others and not turning the ball over a ton, and in being able to slide his feet a ton defensively against really, really quick guys if he plays more of a perimeter role in the NBA. I think that there's room for growth in every single one of those areas while being 6'9", 6'10", and a fantastic shooter. So I'm just really high on Brandon's blend of ability to fit into any type of system that he would play in at the NBA level and have some semblance of self-creation that he can tap into as he continues to get older, get stronger, and a little bit more mature.
Okay, so I would have Brandon Miller at 4 or 5. I'm not totally sure
Okay.
yet. Couple of things to point out here. So one of the issues that people had with Brandon Miller early on was the lack of finishing in the paint, the lack of, 2-point percentage, etc. Over Brandon Miller's last 8 games, that encompasses 7 games that I believe would be considered KenPom tier 1 opponents, maybe a couple of tier 2s in there. Basically outside of Jackson State, these are all good teams that they're playing. Brandon Miller is shooting 61% from 2-point range on about 6 attempts per game. In that time, he's also shooting 50% from 3, and that won't hold necessarily. But at the same token, here's the thing that just really stands out with me to Brandon. It's the consistency. Guys like Jett Howard, for instance, and I really, really like Jett, and I feel like this is a conversation that comes up pretty regularly on the internet. Jett Howard had 6 points against Maryland. He has had games where he has shot 25% in that Eastern Michigan game, 28% against Central Michigan. He's had games where it's been not great. Then he has games like against Iowa where he is unbelievable and unstoppable on some level, right? Brandon hasn't really had outside of the Houston game a disaster game. And by the way, it's a significant difference having a disaster game against Houston than against Central Michigan. Brandon Miller has been incredibly consistent, and I think we're underrating the idea. There's something that Samson Folk, who's a writer, about the Toronto Raptors over at Raptors Republic, that he talks about all the time that I think is so smart. The difference between great players in the NBA and, inconsistent or good players in the NBA, it's not the flashes, it's being able to do it night after night after night. As much as anything. All of these guys, Max Lewis can show you flashes on, any given day where you watch a highlight clip of him and you're like, oh shit, he should be ranked ahead of Brandon Miller. And then you watch the games and it's just okay, let's watch these games back to back to back. It's just not even really all that close, especially when you account for quality of competition. Right. The fact that Brandon can actually defend in the SEC right now at a pretty reasonable level. There's just a big difference, I think, in terms of all of that. The other thing is that I think people are kind of underrating how comfortable Brandon Miller is kind of running an offense now. You go back and you watch that Gonzaga game, Alabama was having him bring the ball up the court and was having him initiate their sets and run offense. And being the guy that actually brought them into the like offensive half court. Yeah, I do have some concerns in terms of him finishing at the rim. Like, he is 6'9". He should finish better than he does at the rim. I guess he's a little bit older than like the normal freshman, but like, I don't know. That feels nitpicky to me on some level. Maybe a little bit not, but I mean, he's not so much drastically older than someone like Jett Howard, who's like another big creator. And I don't mean to keep bringing up Jett. I really like him. We're going to talk about him here in a minute, but like, it's hard for me to like, I get the nitpicky stuff because there was some stuff to nitpick early on in terms of like the physicality as a driver. It is still there from time to time, but Brandon has like genuinely gotten better at it throughout the year as he's gotten more comfortable, and he's getting better at it while the quality of competition on a night to night basis is actually rising. So I don't know, man. Like, I'm struggling with the online conversation about Brandon Miller more than anything. I've liked Brandon for a while now. And this comes from someone who didn't really like Brandon in high school and thought that there were a lot of concerns that he showcased. But he is like a genuine 40% 3-point shooting prospect at 6'9", who is comfortable handling the ball, even if he's not all that comfortable yet because he's not all that strong with his lower half, getting into the paint and like finishing, and his footwork isn't great. I think a lot of the issues he has are fixable at the end of the day. I have Brandon, 4-5. I don't think he should be in the conversation with Wembanyama and Scoot at all. But I mean, if you want to have him anywhere from 3 to like, I don't know, 8, 3 to 7, I think that's reasonable. But it gets hard for me to get past that. I think it gets hard for me to get past that level with him.
He's a jumbo initiator who can really shoot, play on ball or off ball, hits shots off movement, is improving at the things that he needs to, and the areas that he hasn't yet seem like they're very fixable. Like, what he's been labeled special from the moment he got down on that campus there by every coach and teammate that's been around him, as a guy who just kind of has it with the work ethic, with the desire to have the ball in his hands in late game situations. The consistency has been there from a night to night basis. He's doing it really well against SEC teams, and Alabama is throttling opponents in large part due to him and the advantage that he gives them. Like, why are we nitpicking the fact that he's a year older than a lot of these guys and still younger than last year's 4th overall pick, Keegan Murray, when this is a guy that just continues to show us night in and night out that he's pretty special?
Well, he just fits everywhere as well.
Everywhere.
Right? Like, that's the other thing. Like, the shooting and not elite level defense. He's not that kind of defender, but he is switchable defensively at a pretty solid level, to where you can anticipate him coming in and being effective. I think that there's, the conversation around him is, I guess I expected it to turn by now. Maybe people are just set in their ways a little bit too much. Maybe like that initial burst that they got where there were like finishing red flags, right? Maybe maybe it's hard for people to get off of that a little bit, but yeah, I mean, like, again, you look at his last 8 games, he's finishing at a 61% clip, inside of the 3-point line. And that was the big worry. And he's getting better at it, playing higher level competition. I mean, look, it's an 8-game sample, but this whole thing's a fucking 17-game sample. So like half of his time has been really, really good as a finisher. So yeah, I don't know. These are the things that frustrate me.